This is a topic I've been sat on for quite some time because consumer behavior is always changing, but right now especially it's just totally crazy the way behavior is changing. So I'd like to talk to you a little bit about why consumers are so crafty, especially right now. What is actually changing just as a result of what we're currently going through, and some of the things that our brains are defaulting to doing, that we can put a little bit of effort into just understanding how that's happening and then putting some things in place to make sure that those things don't happen. So I'm going to get right into it, and first of all we're just going to talk a little bit of admin. So let's just cover off what we're actually going to cover off today. So the first thing that we're going to take a look at is what has actually changed. And we're going to take a look at some data. So I'm not going to scare you with massive data sets and very pretty graphs that I've got for some really cool data people. About what has actually changed. We'll take a look at some of the science behind why these things are happening, so how the brain is actually working. We'll take a look at biases. This is going to be a big thing that we're going to be talking about today, is the different biases that the brain is really enabling. The 4 different things you need to keep an eye on right now, and how you can change those, why you need to work a little bit harder, and specifically what you can do about all of that. And then I know that we've already got some really cool questions that we'll cover off at the end as well. So I am Kenda Macdonald. I am the founder of Automation Ninjas. So we're an agency that specialises in behavioural marketing automation. And my background is actually in forensic psychology. That's what I studied. And then I ended up getting into the marketing world and creating my baby, Automation Ninjas. And we've been going for about 6 years now, and we're quite a strong team. And we help people create customer journeys. We help people understand consumer behavior so that they can get better quality leads, and they can have happier customers that stick around for longer. That's what we enjoy doing. But I also decided last year that really wanted, well, I decided this 5 years ago, but it actually happened last year. But I really wanted to make some of the behavioral insights more accessible to people, because I fully understand that psychology is one of those things that loads of people don't really get the opportunity to dig into, because it's proper academia. It can be a little bit hard to kind of really crack into all of that. So I ended up writing Hack the Bio-Brain and releasing it so that everybody could have some insight into psychology and how you can use that in your own business. It's all about how we evolve to survive, not to buy stuff online, and what you can do about that. So I actually spend most of my day building pretty flowcharts and helping people understand customer journeys. But today I'm focusing on the behavioral bit. So just on an admin side, Leng is going to do an amazing job, because she's brilliant at collating all of the questions that are going to come through. So if you have any questions, Leng is just going to shout them out, and we'll interrupt where we need to. But most importantly, I'd love for you guys to be drawing parallels with this information. So some of it can feel a little bit esoteric, and but I want you guys to focus on seeing how your consumers could be doing some of these same things. So really focus on seeing how you could bring those parallels in together. So with all of that done, let's talk about what has actually changed, because we've had some pretty significant changes in behavior over this time period. And especially looking at what's going on right now, the first thing that you can see from all the data, which we'll get into, is that consumers are expecting the changes that are happening right now to be really, really long lasting. So unlike businesses, which are hoping for these changes to be a little bit shorter, consumers are expecting all of these changes to be really long. And people are overall cutting back on spending and being really, really conservative right now. And the optimism is really low about how we're going to recover from all of this. So that's some serious, significant changes in behavior. And the changes we were seeing previously was more just like people overall getting more comfortable online, and suddenly forcing us to be at home has meant that there has been a rapid shift online, as well as all of these other changes. So one of the pieces of data I looked at was a brilliant study released from McKinsey last week. So McKinsey are a massive data company, and they had a look at loads of different countries. And this was particularly that our positivity about how this is going to change, our optimism about economic recovery, is really quite low, and it's getting lower. So the UK had a little bit of a boost, but only around 17% of respondents towards the end of that week were actually optimistic about the economy recovering. So we're feeling quite pessimistic as a nation at the moment, particularly in the UK, all over Europe, and then moving into the US as well. The US seems to feel a little bit better about it. So we're feeling pretty bad at the moment about things. We also all generally expect our income to continue decreasing. And this is being really heavily reflected in what we think is going to happen longer term. So particularly looking down here, we can see that in the UK and in the US, we are not expecting these changes to be short term. So the black bar over here is the amount of people that think this is going to last for 4 months or longer, and the majority feel like the situation is going to last for quite some time. And then the blue bar is the people that think that it's going to be, you know, a little bit shorter. But most of us feel like it's going to be long term. And in another study from EY, they actually group people together in the types of people that there are out there that are going through all of this. So what they found was that there are 4 different types of people based on how people sort of categorize themselves. They obviously didn't give them these names. They asked them how they were, what they were changing, what behavior was changing for them. And the majority of people are saving and stockpiling. And that means that they are saving on spending. And where they do spend money is on food right now. Everything else is kind of down across the board, and people are spending a little bit more money on food. Then you have a next group of people, and this is actually my generation predominantly, of people who are cutting deep. So they're cutting expenditure as much as they possibly can. They're not stockpiling, they're just looking at spending the bare minimum possible. You have a nice segment of people that are just staying calm, they're carrying on and hoping to kind of have business as usual. And then you have a smaller segment of people that are hibernating, but they are actually spending on quite large things. So by hibernating, it means that they're kind of just hunkering down for as much as they can, but they are actually spending quite a lot of money. And when you look at that breakdown, you can see that the gray bars here are where people are spending more, and the yellow bars where people are spending less. So we can see that people are obviously not spending pretty much any money on leisure activities or clothing and footwear, but a massive amount on groceries. That's the area that we're spending more right now. And that is also reflected in general business spending. So when people are spending on marketing, when people are spending on social, people are not spending as much money as they used to. There is a small subset of the population. And then one final little look into data is that this is what people think is happening for the future. And a lot of people, as soon as this is over, are going to try and get back to normal. That is our majority. That's what the majority of the population wants right now. They want to get back to normal. They want to get back to spending things normally and what they normally did. Then there is another group which is going to be cautiously extravagant. They're the people who are going to want to go out and they're going to want to splurge. These are the people who are desperate to go out on holiday. These are the people who are desperate to get back to their marketing activities. And we have a subset that wants to stay frugal. We have a smaller subset that wants to keep cutting back. And there is another group, the smallest group, that wants to go back with a bang and just want to spend all the money. And then I just thought this was super, super pretty. The way they laid this data set out was how the people from all segments are going to move into the new segments. And we can see it really is that getting to normal. That's what people really want to do as a majority. Now, this is good for us, okay? But there is also a reason that all of this is happening. And that is because at the end of the day, right now, brains are really, really working against us. We're not having a good time with our brains whatsoever. And the way that I like to explain this is in how we actually pay attention with the world around us. So hopefully you guys will have heard of System 1 and System 2. If not, welcome to the world of Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky. So these were 2 really, really great psychologists, and they came up with this fabulous theory for attention, of which Kahneman actually won the Nobel Prize for in economics. So their idea was that we pay attention utilizing 2 different systems. And this is important because it has implications across everything that we do in business. And they said that these two different systems, inventively called System 1 and System 2, one of the systems is really, really fast. The other system is much slower. One of the systems is so fast it could basically be called automatic, whereas the other system, System 2, is manual. And they like to refer to System 1 as the autopilot and System 2 as the pilot. And the real difference is that System 1 can take in 11 million bits of information per second. It's a massive amount of information, whereas System 2 can only take in 40 bits of information per second. So there's quite the disparity in the amount of information these two systems can take in. And the reason System 1 can take in so much information is because it uses rules and mental shortcuts to understand the world around us, whereas System 2 is so much more intensive and effortful, and it uses calories. And quite frankly, that is the problem with System 2. Because the brain evolved to survive, it didn't evolve to do all of the things that we are doing online right now and all of the big decisions that we have to make. It literally just evolved to kind of get to the next day. Effectively, it doesn't like to use calories. It's going to do anything it can to not use calories. And that's why System 1 is so important, because it uses rules and mental shortcuts, and it's easy for the brain to use. Now, it gets a bit confusing talking about System 1 and System 2 all the time. So I like to use a little analogy. And the thing I like to say is that System 1 is the Minions and System 2 is Gru. Okay, so if you've seen Despicable Me, the movie, you'll get where I'm going with this. But if you haven't, that's your homework. Go and watch it. So basically the premise of the movie is you have this kind of overlord who is Gru, and he goes out there and he's got all these dastardly criminal plans for how he's going to take over the world because he's a criminal mastermind, but he can't do everything by himself. Because he can't do everything by himself, he either sort of employs or enslaves this little race of minion guys who run around and do all of the things. But the problem with the minions is that they can only do one thing. It's kind of like a one minion, one job deal. And that can be a significant issue. And the plot of the movie is the minions getting things wrong when they've been given the wrong job to do and just like all hell breaking loose. But it's also okay because there are lots of minions. And the machine works for the most time because we have thousands of minions running around, each minion doing its own specific job. That is exactly how your brain works. So the minions are like your System 1. We have these rules, and each minion is a rule, and we understand the world around us through these rules. And because a minion looks at something and goes, that's green, that's round, that's edible, that's an apple, it understands that we can have that one specific thing. But that's that one minion's job, and the rest of the minions have to do everything else. And our brain works precisely like this. The problem with the brain is that we use System 1 as a filter through which System 2 can access the rest of the world. So in order to actively pay attention to something, you need to get past the gatekeeper, which is the minions. And if the minions filter information out, and which they do, so you'll have two things that will happen with the minion is, System 1 will see some information and it will go, is this important or is it not important? And if it's not important, it gets filtered out, it gets put in the trash, it never gets paid active attention to. If it is important and it can deal with it, it will, and it will never get passed up to Gru. Or Gru will get involved because it's very, very important and it's been flagged up as something that the brain can spend calories on. So remember, we're rationing calories all the time. And the problem with all of our marketing and all of our different materials and the way that we talk to our customers is we like to think that we're talking to Gru all the time. But the fact of the matter is we're only in System 2 around 15% of the day. Around 85% of the day, we're coasting along using the minions to understand our lives. So most of the time when you're talking to your clients, you're actually, or your customers or your leads, you're talking to their minions. And so minions rule in all of this. The minions are the ones that we want to help. And minions love rules. That's how we understand the world around us. The minions create all of these different rule sets. And the big problem with that is that the minions create bias. So when we are relying on different rules and different shortcuts to understand the rule, we have mistakes that happen with those shortcuts. And those mistakes that happen are basically these different cognitive biases that we have. And there are hundreds of cognitive biases that we know of, but the bias helps us save calories, which means that the brain is happy. And when we are saving calories, you know, everything is good, everything is fine, we are increasing our chances of survival. But it also means that we're making terrible mistakes throughout the day, and we're doing things that don't necessarily make sense. And because psychologists are the way that we are, we have studied lots of these, and we have found that there are literally hundreds of biases. This is a cognitive bias codex. It's just a really nice sort of visual that was put together to show all of the different types of biases that there are out there, and all the different mistakes that we make. And you can go a little bit more in depth with it as well, and you can see the one that has actually all the different definitions. We have literally discovered hundreds of different ways that the minions are running about, and they are making mistakes with all of our information. And that is precisely what is happening right now. It's really quite serious that we're going through this time period in which we are making tons of different mistakes. And we're also being influenced really heavily by our biases as to how our consumer behavior goes. So these are the different types of times when biases in specific will happen. So biases will happen when we have to remember something very specifically. So for instance, we will spend lots of time during our day sort of reinforcing some memories after the fact. Okay, so you'll go through something and you'll experience something, and then you'll rethink it and you'll reinforce that memory. You may not have felt as upset during an argument as you actually think you did, but you may have mulled over it a little bit more and you've added a little bit of stuff into it. So when we have to remember stuff, biases get involved. When we need to act fast, biases get involved. Okay, in particular, when we need to act fast, we have to be confident in our ability to make decisions. And if we don't feel confident, the minions will take over. They'll either switch out a decision for something else, or they'll do all sorts of weird stuff. And as well, if we have too much information in front of us, then we have a problem as well. Bias will get involved. And when there is not enough meaning in the information, then biases get involved. And the difficulty is, when you look at this time period that we're going through, it's really altering our behavior because we're relying on our biases. We have to remember quite a lot of different things. We have to remember new habits and new things. We need to act quickly with a lot of these things. There's a lot of urgency around what's going on right now, especially because our survival as a species is being threatened. There is way too much information out there. We are being completely overloaded with social media and completely overloaded with the news in general. And there isn't much meaning, there isn't much context for us to understand everything. So we don't feel confident in our decisions. We don't feel confident about the future. And, you know, we can see why that's happening because of the biases that the brain leans on. So when bias happens, there are very specific things that we can do as businesses to help. So when we look at these various different areas, we should think, okay, when we're asking people to remember things, the brain is going to do some very specific things. It will edit and reinforce memories after the fact. That's definitely going to happen. We are always going to discard specifics to form things that are much more general. So when you are asking people to understand and recall information, you need to have something that is extremely general that people can pull on, rather than giving them very specific tiny little pieces of information. I think the government did this really well with its slogan to stay home, protect lives, and save the NHS. You know, its slogan was really good. It was very general and very easy to understand, and therefore very easy to recall. And it became something sticky that stayed in our minds. And if we're going to ask people to remember things, people are going to do stuff like they're going to reduce events and lists to very specific key elements. So we can help them understand what those key elements are. And I'm going to show you in specific what we can do. But we'll also do things like we will store memories differently based on how we actually experience that memory. So for instance, let's say the thing I like to always say to my husband, I think it's terrible being married to a psychologist for him, but the thing I always say to my husband is, you know, if we've had an argument, that's it's tainted that memory for me. So we could be walking along the beach and it could be a beautiful memory, but if we're having a disagreement, I remember the disagreement, I don't remember the sunset. And so we tend to taint memories based on how we're actually experiencing it during that time period. which is important to us as businesses because we need to focus on experience to give people a really good memory that happens during that time period. And when we're asking people to act fast, we need to remember that people need to be really secure in the information that we're giving them. We need to be confident in our ability to make a good decision, otherwise we're not going to make the decision. We also need to help people stay focused. So brains will always favor an immediate decision over something that is a little bit more delayed and distant. So if we're asking people to make a decision in the future, we should also ask them to make small commitments right now, because the small commitments right now people are really much more comfortable with. If it's going to be in the future, it's not the instant gratification that we need, so we don't make those decisions. And if we want to get things done, we need to make sure that people are motivated to make that action. So if you need them to act quickly, they have to be motivated. And a little hack for you guys: if you're trying to get people to do stuff quickly, try and get them invested, try and get them to spend a little bit of time and a little bit of energy in it. Because if we have spent time and energy in a specific thing, then we like to stay there. We don't like to waste our time and effort. And I think a lot of businesses try and get people in with trials and stuff to try and help that along. So if you want people to avoid mistakes as well, then just make sure that you're giving them enough information if you want them to act really quickly. But particularly on too much information. So when you're asking people to think about a lot, and right now I think the media is asking quite a lot of us, the government is asking quite a lot of us, life in general is asking quite a lot of us. But we will notice things that have been primed in memory and have been repeated often, which is why the slogan that the government is using works so well. It is repeated very often. And so they are reducing things down to some very basic things to allow us to understand that information around us. And we'll kind of build stereotypes and we'll build general things rather than specifics if you're giving people too much information. And the other thing you can do is if something is really bizarre, or it's really funny, or it's really, really visual, it will help people understand stuff and will clarify too much information. And then when you, so when you're having a look at specific biases, we can, it's kind of a lot of information to say, okay, there's all these hundreds of biases out there, and here's this list of 4 different things, where biases are going to happen. But there are specific things that we can do to keep an eye out. So these are the 4 specific areas that you need to keep an eye out where there might be biases and what we can do to help people during that time period. So for instance, if there is some kind of incentive involved, you need to help people. Okay, so if you are offering people an incentive for doing something and you want them to make the best decision possible right now, you need to help people be really clear on what that decision is. And this doesn't mean laying the information out really logically and, like really going into different tables and different data sets and that kind of stuff. It just means making it really clear and easy to understand for people if you are giving them an incentive to do something, because this is where bias will take over. We want something instant and we're not going to wait for a delayed gratification. So if there is some kind of incentive involved and there is a decision to be made, help people at that point, help them understand what's going on. Also, when the choice is really difficult, if this is a really hard choice, people will do one of 3 things. They will either go for the easier choice. In extreme circumstances, they will go for a hard choice, but that is a very, very small percentage of people. But if a choice is particularly difficult, most people won't make the decision. Our brains will do something really sneaky. They will swap the decision out. So rather than making a big decision, it will swap out a smaller decision. So one of the best examples is for mortgages. So what they found when they did the study with people with mortgages and people having to make mortgage decisions, it's hard to choose a mortgage. It's really hard to choose a mortgage. So what they did with people is they asked people to choose between 4 different types of mortgage. And what people ended up doing was they ended up making a decision based on something really silly between the mortgages. They had these 4 different mortgage types, and each mortgage type had its own little image in the ad and the information. And most people chose a mortgage because they liked the advertising that was being used on that image. They didn't choose it because it was the best mortgage. So our brain didn't go, we need to weigh up all of the pros and cons of this decision. It switched it out for a much easier decision, which one looks prettier. And our brains do this all the time. They'll switch something out that's much easier for a, like, you know, switch a difficult decision out for a much easier one. So if the choice is hard, you need to help a little bit and help people understand what the choice is going to be. But again, break it down and make it easy to understand, because you're not dealing with Gru here, you're dealing with minions all the time. The other time that you need to help people is if the option doesn't happen frequently. And that's what's happening right now. Okay, so this doesn't happen all the time. We don't have a global pandemic all of the time. And of course, everyone's freaking out because this doesn't happen all the time. So instead, you need to help sort of people understand what the decision is about, help it be nice and easy, make the decision quickly, make the decision nice and smooth. And so if the option doesn't happen all the time, that's where you know that you need to help. And then of course, if you feel like there is little understanding of the effects of the consequences of what people are going to do, this is particularly relevant right now, then you need to help people as well. Now, how do we actually help? It's all well and good saying that you have these 4 different times where you need to help people, but how do we actually help people? The first thing that you can do is you can shortcut the minions. Rather than focusing on the end goal, focus on what's right in front of them right now. So meet them where they are at this standpoint. And this is very relevant to your own business. Okay, this is what I meant by trying to see if you can draw parallels. Where are your minions right now? Where are these little guys? What is the big problem and the big challenge for your audience? Particularly in audiences where people aren't buying products and services right now, they still have problems and they still have challenges. They're still researching them. The search volume is still there. So meet people where they are right now. Don't talk about long future consequences. Talk about what's happening right now and talk about what their challenges are right here and right now. And the way that you can reduce these biases is very, very simply with 3 little things. You can make something really tangible. Okay, so there must be a tangible and obvious signal for the minions to take action. To make something really, really clear. And this is probably the biggest mistake I see people make in their marketing. They tend to wrap their call to actions up and make them a little bit difficult to get through to. People can't make decisions if they don't know that something is really tangible. Remember, make it really easy for people because you're talking to minions. Also add some immediacy in there. People always, and minions in particular, prefer an immediate reward over a long-term decision. So if you can make that thing immediate, this is why lead magnets work so well, because someone can sign up for something and they can have it instantly. If you can add some instant gratification in, you will help people make a better decision. And add some certainty in there. Minions will always prefer a certain choice over a risky or uncertain one. And the best way that you can do that is you can explain it to people, you can break things down. So if you can help something be tangible, if you can help it be immediate, and if you can help it be certain in any of those 4 areas that people might make biases in, you're going to help change people's behavior for the better right now in a time period where the minions are running around like headless chickens because, you know, we're in all this insecurity and we don't like insecurity. The brains really, really dislike that and they're in survival mode right now. So the best way to overcome bias is with really, really good quality content. And I don't mean necessarily just blog posts and all that kind of stuff. I mean like really making your ad copy clear, really making any information that you're putting out there really clear, even when you're talking to people, breaking it down to general things rather than specific things, making everything clear and easy to understand in good quality content and giving it that tangibility, giving it that immediacy and giving it that certainty. You will be helping people tremendously during this time period, and it's also how you will build engagement and therefore relationships. So it's all very serious what we're talking about, but I'd like to have some fun with some of the specific biases, because while there are hundreds out there, I wanted to show you some of my favorite ones. This is probably one of my favorite biases. So if you can see the cartoon, he says here, I've heard the rhetoric from both sides, time to do my own research on the real truth. He goes off and Googles, and it's literally the first link that agrees with what you already believe. And he's like, yes, jackpot, right? This is what we call confirmation bias. It's probably one of the most prevalent biases out there. We like information that meets our own information, okay? We don't like to be challenged in our own beliefs. So we will collect information that already it's kind of based on the finding that people will tend to listen more to information that confirms any belief that you already hold. And that just means that people aren't going to listen to information that is dispelling their belief. It's why you get people that get really caught up in things like flat earth conspiracies and that kind of stuff, because they will ignore other information and they will only focus on the stuff that confirms their own belief. We're really bad for this, and particularly because we're being ruled by bias right now. This is something that will be really difficult for your consumers to get around. So if you are trying to quell this, you're going to have a very difficult job ahead of you, and you need to have an open-minded consumer. The second thing is actually really funny. The tendency that we have to take on our own stuff and believe that our own stuff is more awesome than anything else. This is called the IKEA effect. Okay, so this is it's such a great study that they did. I think it was in Harvard Business School. They got people to build IKEA things, and then they got them to put prices on the IKEA things that they just built, how much they would sell it for. And then they had a control group who just had to decide how much to sell an IKEA bookshelf for, the same thing, right? Every single person who built it themselves wanted to sell the product for a much higher price. So the IKEA effect is basically when you place a disproportionately high value on something that you created. And it doesn't even have to be you creating it all by yourself. It could just be something that you partially create. So it's pretty funny how we have that tendency to add more value onto something that we own or we have created than anything else. And it's definitely my favorite effect just because it's called the IKEA effect. But it does mean that when you are creating your content and you are creating stuff, you know, it might feel more important to you than it feels to somebody else. And we should be aware of that bias within ourselves. And then the third one is probably the one that I get the most. And this is definitely me. When you hear a noise in the dark after watching a horror movie, it's definitely a serial killer. That's me 100%, okay? And this is what we call the availability heuristic. We're really easily influenced by information that we can retrieve very quickly in our memory. So if that information is right there at the top of our memory, we kind of tend to think that it's more true than stuff that is, you know, a little bit further on down in the memory, which means that right now in this time period, everyone's going to be really influenced by how we're feeling right now. And because we're globally feeling so much insecurity and so much pessimism, we're going to think that everything is really, really bad. So we remember things that are really vivid in nature, and a pandemic is pretty damn vivid, and we'll give more prominence to recent events. So if you said to a client, you know, like, and you're trying to talk to them about the future, they're not going to think about how things were 6 months ago when everything was fine. They're going to think about what's going on right now. So even for rare events like a pandemic, if something is covered really widely by the media, we tend to believe that it's more true than actually looking at the raw data. So you need to be very conscious of what information is available at the time and how you need to talk to your audience as a result. And my advice would be to lean into what's going on right now. Don't, you know, talk about coronavirus all the time, but lean into what's going on right now and tell people you understand what's going on. Create empathy with people right now during this time period so that you can build trust with them, because the availability heuristic is treating us badly right now, very, very badly. So in rounding up, there are 4 different times when we're going to really feel bias. So when we need to remember stuff, when we need to do things quickly, when there is too much information out there, when there's not enough meaning. That's going to be a bad time for your consumers. And right now, we're really having a hard time with this particularly. And the way that you can combat that is give them something tangible, give them an obvious choice to make, something that is really, really clear. That makes the minions happy. Give them something that is really, really immediate. Give them that instant gratification, and then also make sure that something is really, really certain in the way that you can do things. Now, when you're doing this, things like lead magnets perform spectacularly at this point in time. We're seeing a lot of our clients are having quite a big uptake in their lead magnets because people are out there searching for information. They're uncertain, so they're trying to validate their own opinions before they make an action. So now's your opportunity to build a list. create a lead magnet, engage people, create those relationships, have meaningful conversations with people. Whatever you can do to give people that tangibility, that immediacy, and that certainty is really going to foster a lot of goodwill during this time period. And of course, making that actually happen, if you're interested in this kind of stuff and you really like the psychology behind things, I would suggest that you go and get a book for sure. And you can also go off and you can have a chat with me. If you just want to chat about anything, that's the URL. I'm just doing free chats with people to help them clear their brains. Now it's time for those questions. Oh, and before I forget, we're also doing a bunch of weekly webinars where we're just helping people do all of the things that they need to be doing right now to get a bit more business in or get a bit more leads. They're all free. And we're running another one later on today. So we're on the second webinar right now, but they're all on demand as well. So if you're interested in that kind of stuff and you want some more like specific marketing automation know-how, then those are great. But that's me, Lenka, on the topic. I know we had some great questions to ask.
Wow, simply wow. That was absolutely fantastic. Thank you so much, Kenda. Just a note, we've had quite a few comments and quite a few messages on the Facebook Live. People were feeling quite like minions right now. So they really, really loved your metaphor, which I think is fantastic. And I would recommend everyone, if you want to get Kenda's book, highly recommend. It's brilliant. I read it over Christmas and I'm just rereading it now again with a different mindset, with a different understanding of, you know, the current situation. It's actually very easy to read and understand, even though it's a fairly complex topic. And there were a couple of comments where people are like, I need to rewatch this again. I'm glad that we have recording, because yes, we're recording the session, because yeah, it's a lot to get your head around for the first time. And even though I know how system 1 and system 2 roughly works, I'm always, every time I hear you explaining it again, I'm like, this makes way more sense. Slow thinking, fast thinking, system 1, system 2, whatever. So that's brilliant. Yes, we had a couple of great questions prior to this event on our meetup. So we'll start with those. But if there's anyone who has any other questions, please let us know in the comment. We will get to them. And Dana had a question. How can marketers avoid gut intuition decisions and depend on data? What are the data to look for?
Okay, so the best way to avoid a gut decision is to break down the decision a little bit, and also break down why you're making that decision. So one of the things that you can do to kind of overcome your own biases is to go, okay, I'm making this decision and I want to go this way because of these reasons. So justify it to yourself and break it down. It's one of the easiest ways to stop yourself from making a quick decision and therefore falling into the minion trap. The other thing you can do is, when there is data involved, if you do have data, try and validate that data. Try and validate your decision with data. So one of the things I love doing is I will Google a question, and I'll try and find something from a trusted resource that there is data on. Things like YouGov has an amazing resource where you can validate what consumers are up to. McKinsey is a great resource. So the resource where I got some of the graphics from earlier, they're really great at putting information together in a way that is easy to understand and therefore easy to validate. So definitely somebody I'd look into. And particularly if you have your own data and you can see how people are interacting with things and you can test the water with your own audience, then that's definitely something I do as well. But the data element's really hard because it depends what kind of decision you're making. So sorry, that's not as neatly wrapped up an answer as it could be.
No, that's great. Just, you know, adding little bits to it, and having some resources and places to go for more is always helpful. Another question that we had was from Elodie, and Elodie is asking how to be mindful of what customers are going through and still market. So you touched on it a little bit, but still, anything else you would add to this?
I think one of the most important things brands can do right now is be personable. So obviously that's much easier if you started off having a personality in your brand earlier on. But by sending something out, which is like, this is where we are right now, we're all feeling difficult and we're here to help, and then genuinely being there to help is something that you should be doing. But I'm also seeing a lot of companies being really scared of selling right now. And it's generally something people are always scared of doing. But the question you have to ask yourself is this something of value? Am I offering my audience something of value right now? Is it something that's going to help them during this situation? Then you should feel comfortable still offering that to people if it is of value, because they need it. So be personable, be honest, be authentic with people, and then also just make sure that what you're offering is of value to people.
Awesome. Yeah, we had one question from Emma, who's watching. She had a great comment earlier when you were talking about IKEA effect. She said, like, it's like when you feedback your market research results and the staff disagree with it. Hey, don't shoot the messenger. Like, they're angry with you for the result of the data that you're showing them. But her question is, what do you think are the key challenges marketers are having with data at the moment? There are so many sources. How are the best companies putting it all together? How to actually trust some of the data that we can see right now?
I think the biggest problem that we're having is the distrust of data. People really don't trust data. So I have a few data sources that I go to because I trust them. And there's some things I always look at. I always look at sample size. Is the sample size over 1,000? If it's not over 1,000, I don't trust that data source because it won't be statistically valid. So I always have a look, are they willing to share their sample with you? Are they citing any of the things that they are that they're telling you about? And if they're not, I don't trust it. So if I can't find the raw information, I'm not going to trust what they're saying. And I think distrust of data is the hardest thing to do. The easiest thing to get over that is to make things really transparent. Show people your citations, show people your sources, show people your data sets, but also make it easy to understand. Don't get yourself wrapped up in jargon. If you can't explain it to a 5-year-old, then you're having a bad time because the minions aren't going to listen to it either. So you've got to make things really easy, really approachable, and then you've got to break things down and just be really transparent with everything. And that's how you can cut through the data, definitely.
Awesome. We got someone asking, how much more time are customers spending on social media right now? Are they more or less willing than usual to share their views on the changes that are taking place in local services?
Okay, so one of the data sets that I didn't actually show you, it was part of the McKinsey data research. They're finding that people are spending a lot more time researching right now. So whether that is on social media, whether that is on Google, whether that is on YouTube, people are spending a lot of time researching stuff. And in some cases, more than 50% of the people, I think it was particularly for YouTube, more than 50% of some of the people that are researching different subsets of YouTube are brand new to it, who have never used it before. So there is a lot of people are spending a lot more time researching right now, and people are spending a lot more time consuming right now. So if you can get in there and get that stuff, out there, then now is the time. On the part of the question, which is about whether or not people are willing to share their views, I think people particularly can't speak for other countries because I'm in the UK. And, that's where I'm starting to see stuff. People are a lot more willing to share what's going on right now because there is this sort of national sense of we're in this together and everyone feels like everyone is going through this together. So I think we are feeling a little bit better about sharing more than we were before.
This question kind of goes a little bit back to the previous one with the data and stuff. Dana is asking about the sources where to read about those triggers data. Specifically where to find the data specifically about social media, like trusted publishers you would recommend?
McKinsey is my go-to. And then, I can't remember what the other company's called now. I like EY because they make it really easy to understand the data. It's literally just ey.com. But McKinsey is they have the largest data sets. They have the largest groupings of people that they can go out to. And then I'll try and find the other one. I can't remember off the top of my head, and it's really annoying me, but I trust their data a lot because of the statistical validation. So I'll try and get you that. And then the other one that I do trust is YouGov. So YouGov, there's a free access level, and then there is a paid access level, which is a lot of money, and I ain't paying that. I think only like Coca-Cola and stuff are going to pay for that. but the free access is great because it's all collated from the community, so it's pretty good.